Either way, I want to welcome everybody. Since this event is usually held in the nation's capital, for many of you, this might be the first time you've attended the release of the Case for Inclusion report, a joint project of United Cerebral Palsy and the ANCOR Foundation. If you're one of the newbies, so to speak, then we're glad to have you. And if you've been with us before, we're certainly very glad to have you back. Before I continue, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge a few of the folks without whom this report and today's event would not be happening. First, I want to thank my counterpart and esteemed colleague at ANCOR, CEO Barbara Merrill. I'm deeply grateful to Barbara for her leadership, passion, and for the enormous differences she makes every day on behalf of the disabilities community, and for her organization's willingness to participate in this important collaborative project between ANCOR and UCP. As some of you know, this marks the third year, and Sean had mentioned this, that UCP has partnered with ANCOR on the Case for Inclusion report, which has actually been around since 2006. I can say without hesitation that thanks to this vital collaboration, the report has gotten better and even more relevant each time we publish it, and this year is no exception. I also want to thank the report steering committee, Dr. Sean Luchtenfeld, who you just met, who's been leading the committee for the past 2 years, as well as Shannon McCracken, Gabrielle Sidor with ANCOR, and Hendricks from the McMains Children's Development Center, Lydia Dawson with the Idaho Association of Community Providers, and Yadira Holmes, who serves with the Consumer Direct Care Network. Additionally, representing UCP's affiliates, we have Ann Coffey, CEO of UCP Oregon, Colleen Crispino, UCP at Long Island, and Mike Fodrill, CEO of UCP Association of Greater Indianapolis. And last but not least, from my team, Anita Porco, Fernanda Morrison, and James Garcia. A special thanks goes to Donna Martin and Catherine Thibodeau, the lead authors and our data whispers for this year's report. You'll get to meet Donna in just a few minutes when she presents a breakdown of the report's conclusions and recommendations. Thank you, Donna and Catherine, for your extraordinary work. The Case for Inclusion 2021, as it has been since the inception, is exactly as the title suggests. At its heart, the report exists to make the case that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and the disability community at large should not only be acknowledged, seen and heard, but also fully valued as citizens, influencers, and innovators in the great American experience. There are some 61 million people in the United States, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, who have some type of disability, along with about 10% of Americans with a developmental disability. So when we talk about making a case for the inclusion of people with disabilities, we understand that our job and the job of this report is to advocate for a huge swath of our population, which, despite its many gains, continues to struggle and fight for the full effectuation of its civil and human rights, or as we like to say at UCP, the right to live life without limits. Thus, it's more than timely and appropriate that our 2021 report spotlights the impact of COVID-19 and how the intellectual and developmental disability community has coped, adjusted, suffered, and in many cases triumphed over the unparalleled impediments that have materialized amid the greatest health crisis our nation has faced in more than a century. As this report points out, whereas previous iterations have measured how well state programs supported people with IDD, this year's report reveals how the events of the past years have changed our understanding of the cracks that long existed in our system. While laying out our blueprint for how lawmakers at all levels of government can seize on this critical moment to both transition to a post-pandemic world and build from the lessons of COVID-19 to invest in structural changes that usher in long-term sustainability for community-based disability supports. None of this, of course, has been easy for any of us, but now trying stepping into the shoes of someone with an intellectual developmental disability or direct support professionals. It hasn't been an easy place to be in the best of circumstances, much less in the era of COVID. While the following issue may not seem directly related to this year's Case for Inclusion report, I close my remarks today with brief comments of an equally pressing matter with which we should all be concerned. The topic that goes to the core of who we are as people and as members of humanity itself. I'm talking about the lack of equity in a society that has always touted the virtues of fairness, equality, and yes, inclusion. I'm talking about, and if the experts are right, our nation may finally return to some semblance or normalcy by the end of the year. Unfortunately, as our organization, as many others, including our friends at ANCOR, know too well, COVID-19, which already has taken the lives of 500,000 victims and counting, has not been experienced equally by all of our communities. Here in the US, Latinos, Blacks, Native Americans continue to face infection and death rates far higher than the white counterparts. And the recent CDC data has shown that these populations, and also now among the last in the country to get vaccinated. Now imagine that in the era of COVID-19, that you happen to be among those that are facing the triple burden, or if you will, of someone who is a person of color, poor, and also living with a disability. So as we listen to this year's Case for Inclusion report and its accounts of the challenges, setbacks, and inspiring triumphs of the human spirit, I ask respectfully that we keep in mind the plight of those who have yet to be served, heard, or included. Thank you.